Hello and welcome to this second webinar in our series on anatomy and physiology at level 2. And today, guys, we're going to be looking at the joints in the skeleton, alright? So, all those really valuable things that allow us to move and bend and pick things up. Very, very valuable for someone to live a happy, healthy life. And we're going to look at exactly what the joints are and how they work. So, in particular, at the end of the unit, we'll be able to understand the joints found within the skeletal system. And what we really mean, there's different types of joints inside the human body, and we'll be able to describe each of those joints. We'll then look at the synovial joints in particular, which are the most popular, and we'll be able to describe the structure of a synovial joint. We'll then move on, and we'll be able to describe the types of synovial joints and their range of motion. So there's more than one type of synovial joint, and it allows us to move in lots of different ways. We can describe joint movement potential and joint actions, and then finally 4.5 will describe the short-term and long-term effects of exercise on the skeletal system. So let's get started, and I want you to think about what is a joint in layman's terms. If you were to describe to a 4-year-old child what is a joint, and the very, very simple answer is a joint is where two bones meet or join. Okay, so wherever we have two bones meeting each other in the skeleton, that's a joint. And we have different types of joint. Okay, we have something called a fused joint. All right, and at a fused joint there's absolutely no movement. So this is where bones are when we are born. There is a little bit of growth there. They're a bit soft, so particularly in the skull. There's a bit soft, and as the skull grows and gets stronger, this area is a bit soft. But as we get older, the bones fuse together, and they get hard. And that means that there are, there's nowhere for us to move there. You can't move your skull. It's very, very solid, and you can't move it. That's a fused joint. Some bones are not fused, and what we have there, we have fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. So we've covered our fibrous, which is our immovable joint. We've then got cartilaginous. Cartilaginous is, as we mentioned in the last presentation, those joints in the spine that are semi-movable, made out of cartilage, therefore they're called cartilaginous. Those joints there only allow us a slight bit of movement, and we then have the synovial joints, which are freely movable. So if you imagine the joint at your shoulder, your hip, your knee, ankle, those sort of joints are the ones that allow us free movement, and they are called synovial joints. And just have a little bit of a think about, at those joints, the ones that are freely movable, what kind of action is possible there? We can twist, we can bend, we can make circles, we can go up and down, we can flex, we can extend. Got all these different things going on, alright? But do we know exactly how the joints move? Not quite. And before we get to that and understanding that, we need to know what makes up a synovial joint, alright? And how a synovial joint is put together, because once we know that, we can then look at the range of movement and how these different joints work, okay? And if we look over at the diagram on the right, we can see we've got two bones, alright? And those two bones have both come to an end, and that's where they connect, just there, alright? And at the end of each of these bones, we've got the hyaline cartilage, which was mentioned in the past, and that stops the bones rubbing together. And if they did rub together, they're protected by cartilage, so it means there wouldn't be friction and there wouldn't be pain. That's what the cartilage is. And the cartilage, if you can see the diagram, the cartilage is the little blue bit on the end of these bones. That's your cartilage in there. We have a ligament, alright? So all of these synovial joints are stabilised by a ligament, and the ligament is this bit here. Remember, ligaments connect bone to bone. So it starts here, from this bone, goes around the joint, and then connects in here with our other bone. That's what those ligaments are doing there. Inside the ligament and surrounding the joint, we also have something called a fibrous capsule, and you can see that here. The label's there. Follow the line in. That's the fibrous capsule, alright? And the job of the fibrous capsule is to look after the synovial fluid, alright? Synovial fluid is what keeps, it's a little bit like the WD-40 of the skeleton world, so keeps everything looked after, make sure it's moving smoothly. That's what the fibrous capsule makes sure that none of that really important synovial fluid can escape. The synovial membrane, which is the green bit on the outside, that's responsible for producing the synovial fluid, alright, and it'll secrete it. As we start moving and getting active, it will produce more of that synovial fluid, and that will be contained within the fibrous capsule. And the easiest way for me to describe it is it's a little bit like putting WD-40 on your bike chain, alright? If you didn't have any synovial fluid, or if you didn't put any lubrication on your bike chain, yeah, it would work at first, but after a while it'd become rough, it'd become unsteady, it'd become difficult to use, and eventually it'd get rusty and it'd break. Same thing goes with the human joints. Without that synovial fluid, we wouldn't be able to move in an efficient, pain-free way. And there's a little bit more of a simple diagram there for you to take a look at as well. Really reinforcing, we've got the two bones meeting, ligament around the outside, we have the synovial fluid in there in the middle, and the cartilage as well. And the capsule's not labelled here, but that'll be just around the outside as well, keeping that fluid in there and looked after. So, we have in the body different types of synovial joints, okay? We have ball and socket joint. Most common type of joint is the ball and socket joint, alright? And ball and socket joint, really, it involves a long bone, alright? Because we need the circular part of the long bone that we've got here, epiphysis, remember, to give its correct name. And that connects with another bone, could be the pelvis, as we've got in this example here. And that connects, if you think about the range of movement that you've got there, that ball and socket joint arranges, it allows us to spin, to turn, it gives us a real big range of movement, and that's what we've got going on at a ball and socket joint. Most common examples of a ball and socket joint are going to be the hip and the shoulder as well. We've then got a hinge joint. Hinge joint is quite simple to understand, and it's like a hinge on a door. It opens the joint or it closes the joint. And the real easy way to explain this and understand, if you put your arm out in front of you now, directly in front of your chest while you're listening to me, if you flex your bicep and bring your hand up close to your shoulder, that's your hinge joint working there. That's your elbow joint working. You bring your hand towards your shoulder, you're closing the joint, you take it away, you're making that joint bigger, alright? And we're using a hinge joint to do that. We have a pivot joint, alright? And a pivot joint allows us to rotate. So when we say rotate, we mean turn from side to side, and it allows us to turn to the right and to turn to the left. And we can find a pivot joint at the atlas and axis joint, and that's at the top of the neck. So if you turn your neck to one side or the other, rotate it, the spine stays in the middle, and bones rotate around that. As you can see there on the diagram, you've got one piece in the middle staying steady, the more column-like looking bit, and then you've got the other bones rotating around, alright? That's a pivot joint. The pivot stays in the middle, and the head rotates. Okay, we have a saddle joint, alright? Or, well, to give it an example, the carpo-metacarpal joint, alright? And that means where our thumb joins onto the hand, we've got a saddle joint. And the saddle joint, if you move your thumb around, just while you're watching again, what type of movement is there? What type of movement is possible with the thumb? Go up and down a little bit, forward and backwards a little bit, and the path of movement is like a shallow C in either direction. It's not as flexible as something like a ball and socket joint, but we can move it quite a lot, alright? And that's what's called a saddle joint, and pretty much the only example you'll see of a saddle joint is that joint there in the thumb. We have a sliding gliding joint, or a gliding plane, okay? And what happens here is we have an axis at the side, and we can slide along that axis. So we can slide to one side or the other, go up and down a little bit, not too much, but we can slide along. And a good example here is the clavicle or the collarbone. So if you put your hand on your tummy and slide it out towards the opposite side of your body, you can feel your collarbone there moving and sliding. Okay, that's a sliding or a gliding joint. We then have an ellipsoid joint. All right, examples of ellipsoid joints are in the knuckles. Knuckles is probably the best example. Gives us a little bit like a hinge joint. You can flex up and down. There's a tiny bit of side to side, but not too much. You can go up and down quite a lot. Tiny bit of side to side, but not a great amount at all. If you look at the shape there as well, that joins the bones. So you've got those two circles connecting together. That classifies it as an ellipsoid joint. All right. And then what we want to do is we've got a little bit of a question and answer. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop the presentation on pause for a couple of minutes, and I want you to go through and work out what type of joint is at each of these areas. Okay, so I'm going to pop it on pause just for a sec. Okay, so hopefully you've seen that and you've been able to identify which type of joint and is active really in these different areas. So at the hip and the shoulder, we have a ball and socket joint. Okay, we all know that, or I hope we do by now. We have that ball on the end of the muscle, on the end of the bone, connecting in, and that's a ball and socket joint. We have the hinge joint at the elbow and the knee. All right, the wrist and the ankle, we have the ellipsoid joint. Atlas and axis, that's where we have got our pivot joint there, allowing us to rotate. And then we've got our thumb, which is the saddle joint. And so that we can describe what's happening correctly at all of these joints, we need to know the correct joint actions, and we need to know when something's moving in a certain way in the body, what's the correct terminology to explain that. All right, and I'm going to go through that now, and I'm going to try and explain each of these areas for you in a bit more detail. So flexion, first of all, is when we flex. Flexion is when we make a muscle shorter. Okay, that's flexion. So if the bicep flexes, it gets shorter and brings the hand towards the shoulder. That's the bicep flexing. Alright? We have extension. Extension is the opposite of flexion. It's when a muscle relaxes and gets longer. So we've just done the bicep flexing getting short. If the bicep extends, okay, the hand goes away from the body, gets further away. Okay? The same thing can be done in the quadricep. We flex our quad. That's going to move our foot upwards, like we're kicking a football. If we relax the quad, alright, that's going to mean that our hamstrings are engaged and we're bringing up the heel towards the buttocks. Alright, flexion and extension normally work like opposites. When the bicep flexes, the tricep extends. When the tricep flexes, the bicep extends, okay? That's flexion and extension. We're going to have adduction and abduction. And adduction, so adding to the body, means bringing something closer to the body. So if you were to put your hands out at the side of you, like a little bit like Jesus nailed to the cross a little bit, put your hands out to the side and bring them down closer towards your body, that's adduction. You're adding to the body. Abduction would be the reverse. So start with your hands by your side, lift them out into that Jesus-like position, okay, and that right there, that is abduction. So abduction is like abstraction, taking away. Adduction is like adding and bringing something closer to the body. We then have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Plantar flexion and dorsiflexion, they normally take place in the foot. Plantar flexion is when you plant your foot on the floor. Really plant down that front part of your foot. The heel would be slightly raised. That's plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion is the opposite. Dorsiflexion is lifting up your toes to point upwards towards the sky. Alright? Plantar is to plant, keep it low down. Dorsi is to lift up and point up towards the sky. A little bit like a dorsal fin on a dolphin. The dorsal fin points up out the water. That's the same as dorsiflexion. We then have rotation and circumduction, and these two can be quite easily confused. Alright, so rotation is turning your head from side to side, rotating your head. That's rotation. If we put our hands out by our sides again and make little circles, that's circumduction. So rotation is the whole body moving. Circumduction is a circle motion where the body stays still. So we can make little circles with our hands away from the body. That's circumduction. We can make little circles with our ankles away from the body. The chest and the main part of the body is staying still. That's circumduction. Rotation is moving the whole body, is rotating it round. Following on from that, we have lateral flexion. The easiest way for me to describe lateral flexion, if you look straight ahead of you and try and put your right ear on your right shoulder, that's lateral flexion. So lateral means to move sideways, and flexion means to make shorter, as we've already said. So I'm making my neck muscle shorter, or my trap shorter, my trapezius, and I'm trying to put my ear on my shoulder. So it's moving in a sideways way, okay? Lateral flexion. I only have two more to go now. So pronation and supination. These normally take place in the hands and the feet. Pronation is making the palms of the hand face up. Sorry, pronation is making the palms of the hand face down. Sorry guys, pronation is down. Making, if you turn your hand and face the palms towards the floor, they are pronated. If you go the other way, if you make your palms face up towards the ceiling, that's supination. Alright? If you make your hands like a little bowl of soup in front of you, they're supinated. Pronated is the opposite, when we push out towards the floor. And then finally we have inversion and eversion. And this normally takes place in the ankle. Alright? Eversion is like eversion, is like getting away from something. Eversion is turning the soles of the feet so they face away from the body. You can do it in the hands as well. Facing away from the body is eversion. Facing in towards the body is inversion. Okay, so those two work together. They're opposites to each other. Eversion is to make the palm or the sole of the foot face away. Inversion is to make it face in. And as we said at the start, guys, if you're not clear on any of those areas, just replay the presentation and have another look through. And it might seem a little bit silly, but have a go at some of the movements, because it does make it a lot easier to understand what they are. And you know, you might get a question come up in the exam on a certain type of movement, so it is important that you know what they all are. Okay, so what type of movements are possible at each of the following joints? And what we're going to try and do, we're going to try and go through, and we're going to look at what type of movement is possible at each of those joints. So if we were to look at the hip first of all, the hip is what type of joint? It's a ball and socket, alright? And at a ball and socket, what can we do? Okay, can we go away from the body and back in towards the body? Yes, we can. And that's called abduction and adduction. That's possible at the hip. Alright? Can the hip flex and extend? Yes, it can. Flexion and extension is possible at the hip. Alright? The same thing is going to be possible at the shoulder. Alright? The shoulder can flex and extend. We can flex our shoulder up, we can relax it down. Alright? We can go out, adduction. We can come back, so we can go out away from the body, abduction. We can come back in, adduction. We can also rotate at the hip, and we can rotate at the shoulder. So that type of movement is possible as well. Okay? Elbow and wrist are a little bit more simple. There's only two types of movement really. You can open the joint, which is extension. We can make it smaller, alright, which is flexion. Flexion and extension. We've then got the ankle. It's an ellipsoid joint, alright? What's possible at the ankle, alright? Adduction and abduction. Yes, we can go in and out. inversion and eversion. We can turn the soul away. Alright? Then we've got the atlas and axis, rotation. Atlas and axis joint is at the top of the neck. That's a pivot joint, and we can rotate there. We can turn around to the right, and we can turn around to the left. That's rotation. We're going to have a look at the effects of exercise on the joints, alright? So in the short term, so if I go outside now and I go for a little, I don't know, little warm-up, little 400 metre warm-up, nice and steady. As I start to warm up, I might circle my arms, I might put a couple of bounds in there, I might sort of circle my shoulders and whatnot. As I do that, synovial fluid will begin to be released into the joints that I'm using. So that WD-40, that lubrication, will be going into the joints and getting them ready for movement. That's what's happening in the short term. In the long term, the ligaments and tendons are going to get stronger. Okay, remember ligaments, bone to bone, tendons, muscle to bone. The more we move, the more that we use them, the stronger and the thicker they're going to get. We're going to have, because of those ligaments getting stronger, we're going to have improved joint stability. So our joints are going to be a lot more stable. Our body's going to become more intelligent and more efficient at releasing synovial fluid, and we're also going to have better mobility. Okay, it's going to bring us to an end for this one. As I said, as always, you know, if you need anything, drop us a line. More than happy to help you out, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope that you can now classify the joints, especially the synovial ones. I hope that you know the structure of the joints in terms of what makes them up, in terms of the ligament, the synovial fluid, the synovial membrane, the cartilage in there as well, and where that fits in. If you don't, have a look at the manual or go back through the presentation, because that will be important. You should know the types of movement that are happening and which joints are able to bring about those type of movements. The next in the series is going to be the muscular system, so head on over to the muscular system presentation and I'll see you there.